Brendon O'Connor is an associate professor at the United States Studies Centre and joins us now. The President was clear in saying that people shouldn't be jumping to conclusions, but are there any clues as to whether this is a local or an international act of terrorism?
Well, I suppose Obama has a background of the Oklahoma City bombing, which occurred in this same week in April of 1995, and people jumped to a conclusion that possibly it was Islamic-based terrorists or it was overseas terrorists who had committed this crime. And of course it was a domestic terrorist, Timothy McVeigh. Similarly, after the September 11 attacks in 2001, people had all sorts of theories about who it might be. There was, maybe there was some reflection back on Oklahoma City. So I think there's been this sense that when you jump to a conclusion, if it's the wrong type of group that you might identify as the potential attackers, it can lead to, a degree of maybe racism or sort of a targeting of that group that's probably pretty unhelpful for the police and pretty unhelpful for the society. So I think Obama's right. It's time to be cautious. The police have enormous capacity to analyse, I'd say, these bombs, and let's wait for the details.
But are these events essentially impossible to secure?
Well, a marathon, 42 kilometres, a very long course, 500,000 people out there watching it, 23,000 people running. So it makes it incredibly difficult and I suppose frightening for all of us who love to go to mass events, sporting events, because it gives us that little bit of doubt at the back of our mind that, well, are we entirely safe when we go to these mass public events?
Having said that, this does appear to be a serious security failure. What department is responsible for domestic security in the United States?
Well, there would have been a lot of local police involvement in the Boston Marathon. Homeland Security Department would think about issues in a bigger way. There would be some planning for this. So I think there was, very serious security planning, but there are limitations, obviously. This runs through a massive part of the city of Boston, so many people in the crowd. So I suppose it's a very low act, soft target you might call it, but it's something that unless you have an incredibly securitized society, maybe no spectators, almost impossible to stop this type of thing.
So what happens next? What's the process for trying to track down the person or people responsible?
Well, I suppose after the September 11 attacks in 2001, local police forces got really into anti-terrorism. So they employed a lot of people who analysed bombs. When the London bombings occurred, New York police officers went over to London and analysed those scenes. So I imagine there's similar types of police officers in Boston. There'll probably be teams coming from New York. There are federal agents who will be there. So the analysis, I imagine, will be first rate. So the capacity to track this down in the United States, who did it, is probably greater than ever.
Brendon O'Connor, thank you.
My pleasure.